questions?
And welcome to Positivity Bias, chapter number 4, kind of digging into who is a good Jew, right? So I wanted to share two stories. And these are stories from just last week. I met Marty at the Washington, at the mall in Washington, D.C. at the rally. And we had a conversation recently, and he was telling me he grew up, so his he grew up, the only thing about Judaism that he knew was that all the negative things said by anti-Semites. Mm-hmm. He didn't hear anything positive. He didn't hear anything from home. He got no Jewish education whatsoever. So all he heard was the negative, growing up in school all the time, right? When he was 33, he decided to enlist because he needed to prove to himself that Jews, fight, and they're not wimps. And he felt a need to prove that. Now, at 33, of course, you can't join the Army or the Air Force or anything like that at 33, but he joined the Navy as a CB because they take some older folks in to get some more experience for the CBs, right? And when the opportunity came within the CBs to take a combat position, a defense role, a gunner role for the CBs, he jumped into that position, again, to prove to himself the antithesis of what the negativity he'd grown up with. And it was interesting to have the conversation because all he had that powered his Judaism was anti-Semitism. He had no Jewish education, had no background, didn't even know what it was to be Jewish. Put on tefillin at the mall for the first time. And so part of the conversation was, if you don't have any positive insight, then how do you ward off the negative, right? So Jewish education is critically important. This week's Parsha, we even talk about Yehuda sent brothers ahead of him to, when they were going down to Egypt into exile, he sent some brothers ahead of him to set up a yeshiva so that by the time the family got there with Yaakov and everyone else, yeshivas would already be established and running before they came there, because Jewish education for the next generation is what keeps Judaism alive. That's the critical piece, is continuing ongoing Jewish education. And Marty was proving this from the opposite side, from not having had any. He had only the negative. And I like the example of, it's true in all of the military, but how much more so in the Marine Corps. Every battalion knows its history, where it's been since it began, what battles it fought, and what reputations they have to uphold, and the standard they have to set for those coming in. And that comes from having a really solid background in their education of their battalion. As Sivas Hashem, armies of God, I think that's one of our responsibilities, is to have a good, solid understanding of our heritage, where we fought, what battles we've won, spiritual as well as physical, and to know what we stand for, who we are. And that's the strongest way to fight anti-Semitism, even within ourselves. And I think that's relative to our conversation we're going to have tonight. The other conversation I wanted to have was, I met a young man recently. He is a veteran of the IDF. He's an American who served in the IDF. He's back in the States, and he's looking to get back into the U.S. military, to get into the U.S. military, and looking at where he might do that. But again, one of the things, the conversations we had, is that he grew up in the Mojave Desert, away from anything remotely Jewish, knew very nothing about it, had been dating a not Jewish girl for a couple of years. And at some point, as they started to get serious, he had to stop and have a conversation with a rabbi. Like, why can't I marry someone who's not Jewish? And walking away from that conversation with, unless she's willing to convert, and not just convert for his sake, but truly convert for the right reasons, for God, and actually Orthodox, Sabbath observant, even though he's not, but he couldn't marry her if she didn't do it all the way. And this is the conviction. They broke off. They broke it up, right? And he was sharing this story with someone else that their response was, yeah, of course. Like, what do you mean, of course? Like, what are you talking about? There's a line. There's a line we can't cross. There's a line that says, I can be foolish up to this point, but I will not deny my relationship with God completely. You know, there have been Jews who have no knowledge of Judaism, have no observance of Judaism, but when told bow down to this idol or whatever variation that is, and that depending on the generation, they won't deny the Jewishness. They won't deny their relationship with God. They can't. There's a line you can't cross. And I think that's a good introduction into the talk we want to have tonight about the existential question of who am I? Who am I? What am I? And that's kind of what we started covering last week in the conversations about Viktor Frankl and Sigmund Freud. You know, what are we? Who are we? Etc. And I think this is a big piece of this. And from this chapter, there's some stories from the Rebbe which I think stand out very clearly to give us to actually define for us really clearly what that means, right? There's the guy who said that he felt hypocritical going to Shul on Yom Kippur because he doesn't go any other time of the year. And the Rebbe explaining to him, you're not a hypocrite when you go to Shul on Yom Kippur. You're a hypocrite when you don't go to Shul the rest of the year.
Yeah.
Flip that, right? Flip that around, right? According to the Rebbe, being Jewish means that fulfilling mitzvahs is the most authentic and natural thing for any Jew to do. Anything else is actually an expression of the exile we live in, the gullus that we're in, and it's not that indigenous soul of him, the part of who he really is. That's the real essence, right? Mm-hmm. So anytime we're involved in any incongruity in our behaviors, not according to Torah and mitzvahs, the incongruity is not that we're doing some mitzvahs and not others, but rather it's anything contrary to connecting with God. In the class that we're doing on GPS for the soul, there's a conversation here about, that the essence of the soul, mitzvot, is lashon savta, is connected. The mitzvahs connect us with God. It's part of our intrinsic relationship with God. And that's who we are. That's who we actually are in our essence. Anything incongruent to that's the misnomer, right? Our natural state of chayus, of life, is fulfilling the connection of our godly soul with God through Torah and mitzvahs. And here he talks about the idea of the Rebbe's work, giving an example of chiropractic alignments, chiropractic realignments of our generation to help people get back in line with who we are and the essence of who we are. There's a letter the Rebbe wrote to a youngster who was talking about his upcoming bar mitzvah. And the Rebbe's reference, the young man references to, he stems from a secular family, right? And the Rebbe's correction is, you stem from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah. That's your true essence. The other stuff is part of the gullus that we live in. But that's your real essence. That's who you really are. That's your real family. And we make choices, right? We make choices of how much we're going to align with our essence and how much we're going to get caught up into to other stuff. The Talmud refers to the Jewish people as ma'aminim b'nei ma'aminim, believers, the children of believers. It's a part of our genetic core. It's a part of who we actually are. So it's not a surprise at any time when a Jew comes back to Torah and mitzvahs. It's never a surprise because that's the essence, right? How much uncovering, how much digging has to be done to get there? Well, that's different for everybody depending on their circumstances and what they've gotten themselves involved with. But this is just a revelation of the core being, the essence of the person. The Rebbe gives another example in a letter where he says to folks, he said, I must take exception to what you call, at the conclusion of your letter, my loss to Judaism, right? Because the expression lost does not really fit. A person cannot lose something that is their true essence and inner nature. What's possible is that this true essence of the person is sometimes in a state of suspended animation or covered over with various layers of foreign substances, even those that are in variance with his essence. But the essence cannot be lost. It can only be dormant. And then, of course, then he gives that example of when someone inherits, right? An inheritance is not something that you have to earn. It's not something you have to work for. And you get all of it. You may not take hold of all of it, but it belongs to you. All of Torah and mitzvahs is the inheritance of the congregation of Jacob. Every Jew gets all of Torah and mitzvahs. It's yours. How much you choose to access, how much you choose to, if you had an inheritance and all sitting in a bank account, how much do you actually make use of it? That's up to you. But you own it. You own it lock, stock, and barrel. It totally belongs to you. And so that's the essence of who we truly are. There's a fascinating story here that I've seen quoted before as well. The Talmud states that even the sinner of Israel have as many good deeds as a pomegranate has seeds. But isn't that a statement that's contradictory? If someone is truly a sinner of Israel, how can the Talmud say that they're full of good deeds? And of course, the Rebbe's emotional response to that is, if we're speaking of, if the Jew we speak of is truly full of good deeds, how can you call him a sinner? A sinner of Israel, right? And we're not talking about percentages here. What we're talking about really is, what's the essence? What's the core? The Rebbe was very clear, time and time again, that every single Jewish person is tzedek, is righteous, is holy, has a part of a chelik elikaim imal mamash, an actual part of godliness within their soul. Everything else is just an addition to that. So back to the pomegranates full of seeds, right? So every Jew is full of mitzvahs. Are there some other distractions there? Okay, there might be. There might be. But what aspect are you looking at? Because if you're looking for the negative, you will find it. What's your bias? If you're looking for the negative, you will see it. But if you are always looking for the positive, then how can you call a Jew a sinner? Even if they did something that was a sin, they're full of mitzvahs like a pomegranate full of seeds. You can't call them a sinner. It's a problem. There's a problem there. We acknowledged, right? But the essence is holy. The Talmud talks about a person cannot commit a transgression unless there's a ruach shtus, a spirit of folly, right? What is that folly? We get caught up. We get caught up in the emotions or the environment or the energies of the environment. we can get caught up into something that's not appropriate, that's not good. And we've all been there. We've all been there, and we've all felt regret for having fallen into that nonsense, right? But basically, what the Talmud is saying is that every human being is created in the image of God, which means that every human being is absolute good and absolute kindness. That's who they are. The environment or the emotions or the passions of the moment, they can get in the way. Nowadays, we have people who go to court and they've done something wrong and they claim temporary insanity.
Mhm.
But that's it. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about whatever circumstances that have caused this, the deviation from where we are truly. It's an environmental situation. It's an emotional situation. It's temporary insanity. That's not who the Jew is. The Jew is intrinsically holy and created in the image of God. We need to see that. We need to be able to see every person as that holy person with a godly soul within, created in the image of God, and the variance is due to some other circumstance. As a teacher, one of the things I learned early on, when you've got a troubled kid in class, someone who's causing trouble, right? You got to ask the question, where's that coming from? And then you find out some of the person's background, whatever is going on at home or other circumstances, whatever that might be. That's what's causing the variance, and therefore we need to help shine a light on all the good part. I'll share another story. I was doing emergency room time for my emergency, my EMT, my emergency medical technician's license, and you have to do upkeep your license and everything by doing some time in the emergency room, right? So I was at the ER at Evanston Hospital in Evanston, Illinois, and a teenager comes in, clearly drunk as a skunk, and bloodied up. He'd gone to a party, he'd gotten drunk and got into a fight, and now he's in the ER because he's all messed up, right? So right now we're just letting him kind of sleep off some of that, and we're going to give him some IV fluids to help buoy that up and all. But in the meantime, his mother arrives. Now, the ER is pretty full. All the rooms are full. And so this kid is actually on a gurney in the hallway. And they get into a screaming fight. And mom is yelling at him and he's yelling at her. And it's in the hallway and this is an ER. It was a mess. And the doctor and I started walking over there, together. And I pointed to the mother and kind of fingered with my finger to the doctor, you take her, I'll take him, right? And the doctor grabbed the mom and walked her out of the room and started talking to her. She wasn't going to take him home until he'd had an alcohol test so she could wave it in his face and prove to him that he was actually drunk because he's denying it, which of course he's denying he's drunk. And so she's refusing to take him home until that's done, etc. On the other hand, he's here sitting in the hallway. Doctor takes the mother off for a little bit. I start talking to the young man, right? First of all, I gave him some TLC. I get a warm washcloth and I start cleaning him up and sharing some concern for him. And he's crying and talking, and I asked him a little bit about himself. Well, it turns out that he had been in a military high school. For those in Chicago, he was at Sen. And he was at a military high school, and he had been doing really good. But because financial problems at home, he had to be pulled out of that school, sent to a regular public school, and lost all of his friends, lost his rank because he had rank within the school, but not in public school. That means nothing. So he lost his friends. He lost his rank. He was trying to fit in, and he was struggling. And of course, there's the problems at home that go along with any financial stresses at home. Of course, he's messed up, right? What do you want from the kid? But once he had told me that he had been to military school, I said, "You know what a military bearing is?" And he said, "Yes, sir." Immediately snapped, right? I said, "Yes, sir." And I said, "When your mother comes back out here." Oh, and I said, "How many times have you played around with the other cadets to see if you can make somebody crack?" Right? Get them lined up, and he's got to maintain his military bearing, and everyone else is trying to make him crack up and things like that. It's a fun game, right? How many times have you done that? Plenty of times. Yes, fun, everything, but he knows how to do it. He knows how to maintain his bearing. So I said, next time your mother comes out, no matter what she says, no matter what she screams or what tone she takes, don't talk back. Don't say a word. You maintain your bearing, pretend it's the drill sergeant screaming at you, and don't say a word. Look back, look respectfully, don't make a face, and take it. And she'll spin out her anger and frustration, which may be partially about you, but I'm sure other stuff is on her mind. She'll bear that all out. She'll let it go, and things will be better. But you maintain your bearing. And shortly after I finished cleaning him up, his mother comes back out, and she immediately lays into him. She immediately starts yelling at him in the hallway and everything else. He glances at me, makes eye contact, then looks back at his mom, and he doesn't say a word. And he listens to everything she has to say. And then she calms down. And then she starts to, reach out to hold his hand. And she becomes mommy again. And she's going to take him home, etc. Right? Nice ending to that momentary story, right? All the anger and the frustration in the situation is coming from circumstantial stuff. The kid is a good kid. The mother's a good mother. There's other stuff that's making them messed up. And all the emotions are raw. And that's what the challenges are, right? If we can put that stuff aside and acknowledge the good that's there, that the essence, the core, it's a mother and a son. Come on. And that all then comes up. But you got to be able to let go the rest of the stuff. We've got to be able to see the good, the essence. And so if we're always focused on that every human being is created in the image of God, is a good person, and there's other stuff that's clouding it, and that has to be dealt with, but the essence is going to be good. The soul is eternal, essential, unalterable, pure. That's the root. When we talk about teshuvah is usually translated as repentance, right? But that's not the right translation, because teshuvah is from the word shuv, to return. Return to your essence, return to who you really are. Right? Go back to who you really are. And that's the divine source, a divine essence, an eternal good. And that's what teshuvah really means. And we don't have to get caught up into the momentary departures from so we not to get distracted from the different pieces, but rather to be focused on who we truly are. And that's the essence, right? The chapter finishes off saying that, like the companies that comb through public legal and financial records, searching for unclaimed inheritances to distribute to their rightful recipients, the Rebbe's shluchim, his emissaries, are positioning themselves on street corners around the world, asking people, "Are you Jewish?" What they're really saying is, I have an inheritance that belongs to you. It's priceless. Maybe you want to reclaim your birthright? And that's the essence of that conversation. So I shared a couple of stories. What are some of the stories you guys have of this idea of being able to see the essence, and as soon as you actually cut through the nonsense, you see the essence, it changes the picture. We've talked in leadership classes, we talk about a paradigm shift, right? A paradigm shift is when all of a sudden you have that extra piece of information, and now the whole picture is different, right? And in our case, the paradigm shift is when we see a person and we know that that person is a godly soul hidden in a body, in a gullus, an exile in this world. But if we can have that paradigm shift, the story changes. How about some stories from you guys? Jeff, 30 years as a cop. There's got to be at least some circumstances where you could see through the bluff.
See through the bluff. Not quite sure what story fits into this chapter.
I remember sitting in the ER at Cook County. Again, my ER stories, right? But I remember sitting in the ER at Cook County, some young gang member who was in because of wounds from a fight. And here's this tough guy with tattoos and a leather jacket. And he's looking up at me and saying, "Would you please just hold my hand?"
That's unusual.
Say again?
That's unusual.
But it cuts through the bluff. The essence. He's a human being and he's hurt. And he's playing this tough game because he lives in a tough neighborhood. But that's not who he is. He's somebody's little boy.
Well, that's kind of how this chapter starts out. The Rebbe didn't think that Freud was right about his belief in the id. That I believe that is the right term to describe it.
Right. There's a godly essence.
Versus, I think we all have a need to be loved. Some people, I don't know. there is that less than 1%.
I saw a sign at the airport today, one of the airline companies that was marketing the fact that if you call their helpline, you actually get a human being on the phone. and the advertisement was, it's human to want to talk to a human.
That is so true. I had to call my what do you call it, pharmacy company for my long-term care medications, and they wouldn't let me talk to a real person for a long time. I just hate those the machine talking to me. And now I'm getting calls on my home number from machines, and it sounds like you're talking to a real person for a while.
Yeah.
Then you realize it's not.
It's not, right. And we want to talk to real people. Selena, you've been in the medical world. You have to see these stories too. Share one.
I do. Well, I had a woman who was mother to two guys who walked several miles to get to the hospital. And now it was dark and time for them to go home. So I asked them, where's your car parked? Oh, we don't have a car. I said, but why don't you have a car? You can't afford it. No, our licenses were taken away. I think that they were gang members. They weren't exactly coming out and telling me that, but in conversation, I was figuring out that they were trouble. So I said to them, "So you've been bad boys? Is that what happened?" And they said, well, you could say that. But they made the choice of walking several miles because they felt that they had to honor their mother, and they had to be there for her because she was ill, and
Yeah.
God forbid something should happen. Even if they were bad boys, they had to be good sons.
Excellent example. Yeah. Yep, absolutely. Eliron, you just got finished 4 years of high school. You got to have a story of seeing through the nonsense. There's a lot of game playing that goes on in high school.
I mean, obviously, everybody's playing games. It's actually interesting. So I would say my last year of high school that was my only year that I actually did JROTC. So I was what they call the let one or first year the whole time, and it was great as a senior doing that. But I would say being among freshmen, having the opportunity to, I guess, learn from them. It's nice seeing how I would always stay last in the classroom because I had my laptop. I was doing my own thing in class, and then after it, they'd have some of these big students, these big seniors who are. I'm a let one. I'm a corporal, and I have this cadet colonel who's talking to me and asking me about how to do X, Y, Z because they have no idea how to plan an event or how to write an after action report. And I was just say it was very interesting being able to get that dynamic into as a first year in JROTC.
Right. And so for those who don't know Eliron, in Civil Air Patrol, Eliron went all the way up through Cadet Colonel. But once you finish that and you become an adult, all of a sudden you go back to being nothing. But here he was as a nothing, having certain skills that the seniors don't have. And yeah, it's a fascinating dynamic when these hotshot seniors have to turn around and come back to someone younger and say, by the way, I haven't got a clue how to do this.
It's a good feeling.
Which, interestingly enough, is a major dynamic in military, where you have a brand new officer coming in who's now working with a very well experienced chief master sergeant. And Chief Master Sergeant say, hey, sir, what do you want? Ma'am, what do you want? Taking orders from the officer, right? But the officer knows full well, I don't know what I'm doing. Come on, I'm new here. Help me out. Yeah.
The officer
Fascinating
said
dynamic.
to the NCO, what do you recommend I do?
Well, that's why we used to say you can't spell loss with that LT. So that's what we used to, our new lieutenants, but they leaned on the NCOs a lot because we had the experience. So
Because the NCOs are the workers.
yeah, exactly.